So that's the question for this morning. Which parade are we marching in? And because there's a meeting after, I've been informed it better be a short parade. I want to share some images with you that, again, if you could put the first one up, George. I had the good fortune in 2007 of being in Israel and Palestine, and in Jerusalem in particular, on Palm Sunday. And it was kind of funny because it first dawned on me, right, this is a real place. This is not a story we've heard about, but this is a real place where Jesus actually rode down into Jerusalem on what Sunday we now call Palm Sunday. We don't know what day it was. We know it was leading up to the festival of the Passover. And so we joined in the parade, marching to Jerusalem, down past the Mount of Olives. And thousands and thousands of people come from all around the world at Holy Week. This is the busiest week there is in Jerusalem, because Christians from Russia, China, South America, North America, Africa, Europe, all over the world come there to take part. And it's interesting to see this mass of people winding their way down the road and then up into the gate at Jerusalem, at the Jerusalem wall. And people come from a variety of experiences. There are those who come because of a deep faith. You can see these guys are wearing monks' robes, and they've traveled from somewhere. I think that gentleman's German. There are two guys there, and they've come, and because out of their faith, they come as monks to participate in this as a spiritual discipline and a practice. There are also those who are secular people who come just to, it's like another tourist attraction to be part of it. You can go to the next slide, George. And there's also a whole bunch of Arab people who, Arab Muslims and Christians who, watch the parade like we would to go see the Santa Claus parade. And these kids are watching. And one little kid there, I don't know if you can see it there, looks quite bored. The one in the blue shirt. It's like, how many times do I have to watch this? But it's quite exciting. And then the secular tourist people. One of them inspired the question that I was struggling with this morning as we prepared for this week. I overheard a woman, American woman, tourist, saying, "I just don't get this whole donkey thing. What's that about?" She said, "What's that story?" Like, she wasn't even aware, really what parade she was in. And it got me thinking about, do we even, as people who practice it every year, understand that story? Do we understand what this is about? So, a couple more slides. There's one. Now, again, it's hard to see. But these guys are soldiers, Israeli soldiers. Next slide, please. And there's razor wire all along the route of the parade. Another one. And there's these happy people walking along, celebrating, surrounded by barbed wire. And we can just stop there for a second, George. So that, I'm not sure what Christian denomination that gentleman is, whether he's a priest or a bishop. I think one of the Eastern churches. But one of the things we don't really think of when we sing our hosannahs and about Jesus coming in to the city is that in a way he was surrounded by barbed wire too. The presence of the soldiers. There's one more. You can just leave it on this one, George. Yeah, just leave it there. So I found that it lent some authenticity to the experience of marching down with those singing Hosanna, to be under the watchful eye of the Israeli army and the barbed wire surrounding us, to remind us that it was a profoundly political parade. It wasn't just about Jesus as this great spiritual leader. People understood very clearly when we say over and over, the Son of David coming to set us free, to liberate us. They understood Jesus on his little donkey, riding in to confront the powers of his day, to challenge those powers in a way that they believed would change the whole world and would liberate those people who are living under oppression, poverty, and injustice. Some of you may have been following in the news that Barack Obama was just in Israel and in Palestine. He went to Ramallah for a couple days to meet with leaders of the Palestinian government as well. But if you saw the images, I watched a couple of videos of his arriving. There's like fields of red carpet. And the Air Force One lands on the tarmac. And there's countless people with little things in their ears and coils out of them, you know. And there's armies all around and military security and you know, all the signs of wealth and power there. And if you imagine that somewhere on the other side of the city last week, some kind of peasant uprising of a couple hundred people was marching in at the same time, that it wouldn't have got much news coverage. People wouldn't have really been aware that it was happening. And yet, that's kind of the scenario we're looking at, only even more extreme, because when Pilate was arriving in the city from the west, from Rome, who has occupied Jerusalem and Judah. And Pilate and his armies were marching into the city, on the opposite side of the city, around the same time. We're not sure if it was exactly the same day, but we do know there was a massive troop movement into the city at that time, because at festival time there was always the possibility of rabble-rousers causing an insurrection, rising up and causing trouble. So they sent the army. So you have to picture Pilate on the great white stallion of some kind riding into the city, and chariots coming along with him, and legions of soldiers with spears and swords and shields and armor marching in to the city, and everyone watching. Wow, look at this display of power. And then Jesus, clip-clop, 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 and a bunch of peasants yelling, "Hosanna, Hosanna." If you can picture that, you begin to understand what's going on in this story. What it is a planned act of civil disobedience. It is a mockery of the power of the stallion and of the one and the army. Jesus chose a donkey because of its humility, because of its smallness and its weakness. Some of you will remember, it's going back quite a way, when the Summit of the Americas was held in Quebec City, and Larry Vian and I took some of the youth from here to participate in it, which was a crazy dangerous thing to do, but it worked out okay. I think everybody should be tear gassed before they're 16, you know? And actually the truth was, the bigger challenge was Larry and I keeping them from getting more involved than they did. But while we were there, one of the things that we watched and talked about was the ways in which people practiced nonviolent civil disobedience. What some people call the third way, a way of challenging those in power without resorting to the tools of power. And the one that sticks out of my mind is there was this, it was all in French, so I'm translating, but there was a man sitting there, and he'd erected a little fence around a patch of grass about this big in a park. And he was sitting in it, and he had these signs on it saying, you know, no entry, you can't go in here, you have to keep out. He had them all around. And he sat in there, and he had a pea shooter. And if you got near the fence, he fired a pea at you. Wow! And he'd go, boo! And he'd yell at you. And he, you know, you wanted to laugh with him, but he was dead serious. He wouldn't crack a smile about it. But it was such a great send-up of the craziness that was going on in the city at that time, with you know, just legions of police officers and soldiers dressed like something from Star Wars. You know, they had all the equipment on and the masks and everything, and you know, there was these huge tall fences, and you know, the alternate summit was going on down here having the conversation, and all the people with power and money and influence in the world were in this fence having their conversation. And I think that guy in the fence and some others was a bit like what Jesus and his disciples were doing. You know, they'd set it up, they got the donkey, they went and said, And it was a playfulness. I imagine it being a very playful thing. The interesting thing I want to tell you about the Gospel of Luke's version of the story, it's in all 4 Gospels, so I mean there's some sense that everyone agrees this is something that happened and it was very important. But in Luke's Gospel, Luke's version of the story, there were no palm leaves. You know, no one was waving palm leaves. And William remembered the part that Luke has, which is that the people lay their cloaks down in front of the donkey and on the donkey. I was very curious about that this week. Found myself wondering, what does it mean to lay your cloak down before Jesus? What does it mean to put your cloak, your coat down before Jesus? We don't know exactly. We do know that from some other stories, it's a symbol of wealth, it's a symbol of security, the cloak. In some stories, not all of them. I wondered if it's an element of laying one's heart down, or making it a sign of an allegiance, that I choose this parade, that I surrender myself to this way of traveling in the world, that I've made a choice, and I've given myself over to the parade, to following in the way of Jesus, as we say we travel together. We don't know exactly. But we do know that most of us will not find ourselves in that clash with the powers in some grand scale. But we do know that every day we have to choose which parade we're in. Every single day. Sometimes many times a day. We have to choose whether we're going to travel in the way of power and wealth and violence, or whether we're going to travel in the way of humility, of caring, and concern for the poor and the imprisoned and the unjust. I mean, think of some examples. When someone tells a racist joke, or makes a bigoted crack about gay and lesbian people, or about Aboriginal people, it's in that moment we have to find our third way. Not to confront with violence, but nor to wilt and remain silent. How do we respond? How do we respond when we ask our politicians questions? When we're trying to decide who we're going to vote for? Is it, well, this is what I need and what I want, and I'm going to vote for the person who gives me my thing most? Or is it saying, I value the welfare of the poorest in our culture. I value the treatment of prisoners. I'm concerned about those with disabilities or who can't find year-round work. A vote can be a decision about what parade we're marching in. Sometimes those bigger events will confront us and we'll need to be ready for them. But I honestly think that as followers of Jesus, it's those simple day-to-day acts by which we are transformed and by which our communities are transformed. Finally, that beautiful line, if everyone were silent. And by the way, it was the religious leaders who were suggesting to Jesus he tone it down because they were afraid for their people and for one another. It wasn't, going to bring the hammer down. It's like, take it easy. You're going to get us in trouble. And Jesus responds, if every voice was silent, even the stones themselves would shout. Even the earth is waiting for this transformation. Some of us were reminded of that as you turned your lights out last night or took a moment to think about what you could do to be a more energy-efficient home. It's a reminder that all the earth cries out for the transformation that Jesus brings, for a kind of justice for people and the planet that comes not from a sense of power and entitlement, but comes from a sense of grace and healing and beauty. Each one of us has to decide which parade we're going to wave our palms at before whom we will lay our cloaks down. It's a wonderful invitation, a wonderful celebration today for us to have a chance to be part of that. Amen.